Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freedom Watch, your daily dose of raw liberty, streaming online at foxnews.com. I'm your host, Judge Andrew Napolitano, here defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. Last Friday, the House Financial Services Committee held a hearing on H.R. 1207, the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, introduced earlier this year by my next guest, Congressman Ron Paul. The bill, with 291 co-sponsors, is now one step closer to a full audit of the most secretive non-governmental organization in the government that runs our lives today. It is, of course, my great pleasure to introduce one of America's great defenders of freedom and liberty in Congress or anywhere, Congressman Ron Paul, and author of the hot new book, End the Fed. He joins us on the phone from his congressional district office in the great state of Texas. Congressman Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Are we a step closer to auditing the Fed as a result of the hearing conducted by Congressman Frank's committee last week?
Yes, we're a step forward. I don't know how close we are to achieving victory. We still have the Senate to contend with. We have the President to contend with. We have the manipulations that can go on even in the House, even though we have almost these 300 individuals co-sponsoring it. But there's powerful forces opposed to us. So there are a lot of obstacles. You know, even if we get the bill passed, you can imagine the Federal Reserve doing exactly what they're doing to the Freedom of Information Act. You know, there are a couple cases now, I think both by Fox and Bloomberg have asked for information, and they're resisting this, and they're fighting and appealing it. I suspect there's still going to be a lot of resistance, but the answer to the question is definitely we're a step closer. The biggest step ever has been the bringing this important issue to the American people. I mean, a couple of years ago, they weren't even talking about this, and yet today it's a very important issue. So in many ways, we're making great progress.
In a nutshell, why should the Fed be audited?
Because there's a responsibility by Congress to protect the people. They shouldn't create something secret that actually harms the people. So there's a moral and a legal and a constitutional responsibility for Congress to not allow this secret central bank to take care of special interests at the expense of the American taxpayer.
You know, yesterday the New York Times, it was the New York Times, but it seemed like an accurate report. The New York Times reported that there are 6 people looking for jobs for every 1 job available. And yet the head of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Bernanke, who, by the way, I think his greatest fear is being cross-examined by you, Dr. Paul, nevertheless said the recession is over. Does he know something we don't? What the heck is he talking about when he says the recession is over?
Well, what did he know when he said everything was hunky-dory, you know, even months before the major calamity hit? Because they approach it differently. They either talk themselves into believing that, or they themselves, don't know what's happening, and they're deliberately deceiving us. But they never told us what was happening before. So I don't know how anybody could believe what they're telling us now, that the recession is over. I think the bottom line is really the unemployment, and you mentioned 6 people looking for 1 job out there. And as long as that's happening, as long as those numbers are growing, there's a major recession or depression going on. You know, they feel good. They say, well, Obama's achieved a miracle. There used to be 700,000 people applying for unemployment every week. Now there's only 550,000. You know, over 500,000 people every week going to the government, you know, to get unemployment benefits. Pretty serious, I think.
You know, I think you put your finger on something, Congressman Paul, that you and I have talked about on air and off many times. How could the people in the Fed, with all the power that they have, be so wrong, be so ignorant of history, be so determined to use the same techniques that got us in this mess in an effort to get it out of it? I think they are deceiving themselves. I don't think they're evil or vicious. I think they simply have talked themselves into believing we're the government, we must be right. We have to use governmental power to end this stuff. So here's what we'll do. Never mind that it has never worked before.
Yeah. You know, they have those instincts that want to, where they want to run other people's lives and run the economy for the benefit of everybody. And they have always felt comfortable because the so-called intellectuals of our universities were backing them up. But I can remember when I was trying to sort this all out and I didn't find the answers, I felt very, very good when I found the answers in Austrian economics and economists who were very brilliant. Then I started to feel comfortable. They haven't been exposed to the same economic policies that you and I have been exposed to. They haven't been exposed to people like Krugman, and they win Nobel Prizes, and they're the establishment. They've been taught that from first grade on all the way up through college and graduate work. So they feel comfortable, and they're almost determined to go to the mat to prove that they're right.
Last week at the G20 summit meeting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the big news was not anything about an international monetary standard or China deciding not to loan us any more money. The big news was the president coming before national television cameras on Friday morning, flanked by French President Sarkozy and British Prime Minister Brown, threatening Iran, saying, we understand you have nuclear capability, and if you don't let inspectors in there, we're going to do something about it. Are we seeing the same thing inexplicably with Barack Obama all over again that we saw with George Bush and Iraq?
Yeah, I think so, because there was that yellow cake, the forged papers with yellow cake. The UN inspectors were inside Iraq. Saddam Hussein, for all his evil and nonsense he put on, the inspectors were there, and it was almost like, let's start the bombing before they prove that there aren't any weapons there. Remember, they had to remove the UN inspectors so that the war could start. And this is the same old thing again. The UN and IAEA has been inspecting them all along. They have never been found in air. They've always followed the law. And even on this episode, they're claiming, well, they never told us about it. They're the ones who told us that. They released it. And the Non-Proliferation Treaty says that they have to only tell the people in the UN 6 months before they go into production. So they have obeyed the law, and they have not been found in violation. At the same time, what has been the Ahmadinejad's response? Come on in. The inspectors come in. He has agreed that they can come in. And yeah, I think your analogy is right, and I think it's scary. I think this is warmongering. It smells just like what would happen in the early part of this decade when Bush was determined, a long time before 9/11, how are we going to hit them? And they've been working hard on when they're going to hit Iran. And I'm afraid there are going to be sanctions put on there that will unify the Iranians, and they'll become more militant, not less.
My colleagues in this building and at other cable channels around town have all been arguing, and I among them, over the wisdom and propriety of an American general, Stanley McChrystal, going on national television and saying the president has only spoken to me once, and as far as I know, he's sitting on my report that I need 40,000 more troops. Did I miss something? Did we declare war on Afghanistan? Why is it that a general goes on national television to tell the president that he must give him 40,000 more troops for an undeclared war?
This is really hard to quite figure out, because if he is acting on his own, if you had a reasonably thinking president, wouldn't he be fired immediately?
I would think so.
He should be fired. But if not, then this is a game they're playing. It's back and forth, and Obama's allowed to take a certain stand. Oh, I don't want these troops to help build up his popularity with his base. At the same time, we have to appease the hawks, and we let the generals out there. It's a preposterous way to run foreign policy or a war. That's why I've always argued if you're in a war, it better be a war, it better be a hot war, you better get it over with, it better be declared, and everybody be behind it. This way, the wars just go on, they linger on, they're political wars, they're NATO wars, they're UN wars, the worst thing in the world for the American people and for our country.
Before I let you go, what's the next step on H.R. 1207? I gather from the comments that Congressman Barney Frank made, some of which were very pleasing to hear out of his mouth about you, that it will pass the committee in some form. Is it likely to get to the floor of the House for a vote this year, before Christmas?
No, not likely, but I haven't given up on that, and that's what I'm going to fight for. He more or less has alluded to me that yes, he wants this done. It's going to do. We're going to do it. We're going to change a couple things, which I more or less have agreed. To just have technical changes. But I think his goal is to put it in his package. My goal is to get it to the House floor. And the more public pressure we have, the stronger my argument is. I don't have any strong arguments in Washington. My strength in this movement and this bill comes from the strength of the American people. And with 75% of the American people now supporting the bill, and so many Democrats and all Republicans supporting it, we do have a chance. I'm going to press real hard to try to get a vote on the floor, but I can't guarantee that.
Congressman Paul, thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.